Hello, I'm Ellen Binns, coming today from Wheaton, Illinois, in the U.S. Welcome to Impact, a podcast about how we can each bring about real change in the world and getting practical in making that happen.
And hello, I'm Clive Johnson, coming today from Sydney, Australia. A special welcome if you're listening for the first time, and a big thank you to our new subscribers. Each week, we look at one aspect of how we can connect our hearts to offer healing for others with our collective intention, prayers, and meditation, and go behind the headlines of a critical happening in our world that needs our attention right now.
In today's episode, we take one of these regular deep dives to more fully understand and tune in with something many of us may know only a little about, and see where we might hone in with our prayers and intentions. And as we record, it's June 25th, 2024. So welcome back. After a short break. We're thrilled to be starting our second season. We're looking forward to talking with many wonderful, inspiring guests and filling in the gaps of our knowledge around where our intentions and focus for prayers may be directed. But we're also planning to take a closer look at how and why intention works, with a few deep dive discussions planned for the coming weeks. This week, however, our focus is on a topic that often is overlooked in discussions about different discrimination: ageism, and specifically ageism affecting older people.
Yeah, because of course ageism can apply to young as well, but we're focusing today on the old. Today, close to 1 billion people worldwide are aged 60 years and over. And actually, I was just thinking, Ellen, we were talking about some of our own relatives. I've just been visiting an aunt who's well in her 90s, and I think she's fitter than me, actually.
Well, I fall in this category. I don't think you do, but I do.
Yeah. This number, this 1 billion figure, is expected. I am actually over 60 years, so I am in that number. Actually, yes. Yeah. Only, well, by a couple of years. Yeah. And is expected to reach 1.4 billion by 2030. So only just a few years' time. The number of persons aged 80 or over is also growing at an ever faster rate, with close to 150 million already in that age group, pointing to considerable gains in our lifespans that we can expect if the current trends and global conditions continue. Given this huge change in demographics, the unique health and social issues associated with aging are set to become increasingly more important in the coming years. As fertility declines and people are choosing smaller families, the population structure of many countries is shifting towards an inverted population pyramid. Yet many countries are not responding adequately to facing this massive challenge or change.
Most of us can probably list several of the challenges of aging, or at least what are commonly perceived to be normal challenges. Among these are likely to be a higher incidence of chronic health conditions among the older population, such as cancer, heart disease, stroke and diabetes, dementia, deteriorating mental health. For example, in the UK, it's estimated that as much as 70% of the older population suffers from depression, physical injury resulting from falls, which can result in serious injuries, such as hip fractures, reduced mobility, malnutrition, which is commonly experienced among elderly population, as in richer nations, as well as in developing countries, often brought about by underlying health conditions that can cause a lack of appetite, but also due to isolation and low income. Incontinence, which can severely affect the quality of life of older adults, and impairments to sight and hearing also being very common problems as we age.
And not just in our health, but social issues too commonly affect the quality of life of older people. This includes loneliness suffered after losing a spouse, partner, or close friends who may have formed their main circle of acquaintances and their social life. Social isolation, with many adult children often being busy with their own lives or not living nearby. losing a sense of self-worth and purpose following retirement, needing to move home due to financial or health reasons, being unable to manage everyday activities such as shopping and cooking, and needing to act as a family caregiver to a spouse or partner. Loneliness alone presents specific challenges, such as health problems going undetected and difficulties adapting to new physical capabilities following an illness or injury. Loneliness can also hasten the onset of dementia, negatively affect the cardiovascular system, and cause depression. The campaign to end loneliness says that living alone with poor social connections is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and worse for your overall health than obesity. Incredible, isn't it?
Oh my goodness. 15 cigarettes a day.
Incredible.
Wow.
Yeah. However, these challenges are compounded by the problem of ageism.
So, what is ageism? Medical News Today defines ageism as prejudice or discrimination against people based on their age. It negatively impacts on physical and mental health, while studies link it with earlier death. Ageism can be directed younger as well as older people. However, we'll save our focus on the effects for younger generations for another time. Unlike other causes of inequity, such as racism, sexism, or ableism, anyone can experience ageism, and many of us likely will or have had that happen to us. It is so widespread and accepted in our attitudes and policies, laws, and institutions that we do not even recognize its detrimental effect on our dignity and rights, says Michelle Bachelet, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. Ageism manifests in various ways, as institutional ageism, which occurs when an institution perpetuates ageism through its actions and policies. Interpersonal ageism, experienced in social interactions, and internalized ageism, which is where a person internalizes ageist beliefs to themselves.
It can be seen explicitly, such as someone having openly hostile beliefs about age, but also more unintentionally, such as patronizing beliefs towards people based on their age, or believing that older adults are less capable and require childlike guidance to carry out some tasks. I have to confess here, I was just thinking that I'm probably guilty, like many are sometimes, in excluding some of my older relatives and so on in conversation. If they can't be heard or they're not hearing quite as well, you're with other people, the conversation is carrying on to a certain level. Perhaps sometimes you're tuning out from them. So a possible intention that we might consider here is for each of us really to become more mindful of any of this kind of, I think it's called implicit bias, isn't it, that we may have towards older people, and perhaps catching ourselves, watching out our words, not jumping to assumptions about abilities, and making sure that they have a hearing, as it were, in a conversation.
Absolutely.
Ageism directed at the elderly is very common. For example, a national poll on healthy aging conducted back in 2022 revealed that 82% of older Americans reported experiencing ageism regularly, including 65% who had experienced ageist messages from the media, and 45% experiencing interpersonal ageism. And the 2021 World Health Organization report concluded that every second person in the world is believed to hold ageist attitudes.
That's 50%.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know the detail of that survey. It'd be interesting to know how they reached that conclusion, but it's clearly not just a finger in the air kind of assessment. It's been, undertaken quite seriously. Disturbingly, many common perceptions of the elderly are actually false. Becca Levi, a professor of epidemiology at Yale School of Public Health and of psychology at Yale University, found information that not only contradicted negative stereotypes, but also highlighted strengths that come with aging. For example, she says that it's true that some cognitive skills, such as reaction times, tend to slow a bit over time, but other functions remain robust and even improve. One study of older adults, for instance, showed they were better than middle-aged adults at orienting their attention and ignoring distractions. There's hope for us.
Yeah.
She also found a host of examples of artists and musicians who became more creative and more generative later in life.
I totally can see that.
Yeah.
Believe that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm sure that has to do with the function of time, too. When
Yes.
you're not taking care of your family anymore and you've retired and the world opens up for you in that direction.
Yeah, there's kind of a greater freedom, isn't there, really, to really express yourself and also tap into your inner life, I guess, as well.
And the wisdom you've accrued over the years.
Absolutely.
Others point out that the common views toward the elderly aren't just false, they're also not in society's interests either. Nancy Morrow Howell, professor of social policy at Washington University in St. Louis, remarks that the narrative that age is decline, age is burden, hurts everyone, individuals, families, communities, and society. Continuing, some older adults do need support, but mostly they're giving it. They make important contributions to the workforce, including paid work as well as volunteering and caregiving. Those contributions to society are a resource, not a luxury.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the American Psychological Association, or the APA, also says that attitudes behind age bias are often rooted in false beliefs, pointing out that whilst it's true that the risk of some chronic diseases and dementia increases with age, most older adults maintain quite good health and cognitive functioning well into old age. The association says that ageism is so ingrained in our culture that we often don't even notice it. So we might hold as an intention here a will that we're more ready as individuals to recognize the contributions that older people make, especially perhaps including the wisdom that they have to share and the support they give for younger parents. I was thinking of my aunt. She's in her 90s and supporting grandchildren and now great-grandchildren. really playing a very important role. And also,
and as we've often talked about, I help my parents who are 96 and almost 97 and almost 90. And I work with my father, who still comes to work 5 or 6 days a week.
Sure.
Yeah, it is. It's extra. He will not accept any of these ageism things we've described. He would say, no, that's not him.
Good for him. He's a role model.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
But also, of course, the creativity that we mentioned and really making sure that these are highlighted and celebrated. They're kind of called out, as it were, in communities that they're in.
Yeah. So in what ways do older people face discrimination around the world? Here are some key areas where ageism manifests in many countries around the world. Ageism in employment. In 2022, a report by the U.S. nonprofit organization AARP, which serves the interest of people over 50, revealed that 62% of older employees face age discrimination. And then to give a few examples, hiring practices. Older individuals often face difficulties in getting hired due to stereotypes that they're less productive, less adaptable to new technologies, or more costly in terms of salary and benefits. Employers often prefer younger candidates, believing they are a better investment. And in job interviews, asking for an applicant's age when it's not relevant to the job. And perception of productivity. Older workers are often viewed as being less productive or resistant to change, which can limit their career opportunities. And in workplace treatment, older employees may be excluded from company activities, decision-making, client meetings, or opportunities for skill development. They might also receive fewer or easier assignments, be overlooked for promotions, or face subtle or explicit age-related comments, and retirement pressures. Many older workers are pressured into early retirement or are given unfavorable tasks that push them towards leaving the workforce. Older employees are also often overlooked when it comes to training programs. Only 24% of adults aged 55 to 65 participate in job-related training, according to the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, which studies workplace performance across OECD countries. The Academy to Innovate HR, AIHR, points out that age discrimination in the workplace often has its root in stereotypes, such as assumptions that older employees take more sick days, are slow, and don't know how to work with technology. While most organizations in many countries now have diversity, equity, and inclusion departments in place to tackle issues such as racism and gender bias, and age bias is rarely given prominent attention. That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. When we talk about DEI, we don't talk about ageism.
No, absolutely. You would think by now, wouldn't you, that the HR departments of especially larger companies would figured out actually that older people are a resource, that these stereotypes just aren't true in the main. And in fact,
well, there is a stereotype also that the younger generation sometimes don't have the same work ethic as the older generation does. And it seems to me that it would behoove some companies to hire those folks who still have that work ethic.
Yes.
That's just a personal opinion, but
yes.
I hear frustration from friends who own companies that it's difficult. So they might be someone to look at.
And certainly many, I guess, perhaps particularly in the 60s, 70s, there are many who want to keep working. And in some cases, or many cases, need to keep working as well. So they've got a real incentive to be dedicated and to apply themselves and not take sick days and so on. Yeah. Well, another area where discrimination is often felt is in healthcare. And some examples here include infantilization. This is where older adults are subjected to what's called sometimes elder speak, a patronizing form of communication that can reinforce unequal power dynamics and create barriers to effective care, especially for those with dementia. I was thinking also, but probably also those whose hearing may have deteriorated a bit. So, the idea of spelling out words, talking slowly, shouting, it sort of, there's a bit of a thin line here, isn't there, between being clear and helpful and infantilizing. Also, in the rationing of healthcare, policies that prioritize younger patients over older ones, which can limit access to necessary medical treatments for older people. Inadequate care, older patients often receiving less attention and lower quality care. For example, social workers and doctors spending less time with older patients, leading to disparities in treatment. We are talking in general terms here, of course. These observations are based on discrimination seen across a range of countries and institutions. Of course, there are happily many experiences that contradict these responses. I guess most of us know of many such examples. But we might hold in our thoughts, our prayers, or intentions a desire to work to make people aware of infantilizing or patronizing speech that they, or indeed ourselves, may use when speaking with older people, and perhaps with insensitivity towards their actual abilities.
And ageism also plays out in social interactions, such as interpersonal ageism, in which in social settings, older people may be treated as invisible, unintelligent, or expendable. They might face ageist jokes, offensive generalizations, and their concerns or wishes may be disregarded. This includes treating older family members as though they are invisible or less intelligent. Isolation and marginalization where outdated stereotypes can lead to the isolation and marginalization of older adults or excluding from social activities and decision-making, reducing their sense of purpose and self-esteem. And financial challenges, they go hand in hand with ageism. Many older adults face economic insecurity, with a significant portion living below the poverty line. This can be exacerbated by ageist policies that limit their access to financial services and employment opportunities, as we said. Older adults are more susceptible to fraud and scams, which can increase their financial insecurity, while ageist policies in insurance and financial services can impose age limits, penalties, and denials of service. And I personally think those people who go after the elderly and those scams have a special place for them when they leave this earth.
Absolutely. Oh, my goodness. The media as well often plays a part in creating negative portrayals that can help perpetuate ageist attitudes towards the elderly, often using stereotypes that depict older adults as frail, non-contributors, or a burden to society. And these, in turn, have a very powerful, often very powerful impact, of course, on societal attitudes and cultural norms that reinforce these false beliefs. So, in short, ageism can manifest in virtually every area of an older person's life. And for some, the problem is exacerbated by the circumstances they find themselves in. Recent reports by Human Rights Watch highlight the fact that war doesn't discriminate against anyone. All people are as likely to be attacked, whatever their age. However, disproportionately more older people are able to respond to what is happening, such as the need to flee their homes or lacking access to vital medicines and medical support. Human Rights Watch further says that rising global temperatures have taken a disproportionate toll on older and disabled people, while in many countries, a digital divide affects older people who cannot afford or do not have the capacity to access the internet, to access such facilities as food delivery, healthcare services, and communication with loved ones. And actually, just thinking about how much is controlled by apps on smartphones these days, whether you're parking your car or checking it, I don't know, going to the cinema or whatever it is, if you've not got a smartphone, you're at quite a disadvantage very often these days.
Yes.
So we might think, how can community support the elderly better? This might be a focus for prayers intention. As many of our communities witness during the period of lockdown, that was a really wonderful time that shows it can be done, I think. People looking out for elderly neighbors and so on, helping out with shopping, keeping a watch on their well-being, offering to go online and so on, accessing websites. So perhaps one will we might have, subject for our prayers, would be a permanent lockdown mentality, shall we call it?
Yeah. And open awareness,
Yeah.
We see this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how should we respond to the problem of discrimination, whether it's explicitly expressed or not? And various legal protections, such as the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, ADEA, and the Older Workers Benefit Protection Act, OWBPA in the United States, aim to protect older individuals from age-based discrimination in employment in areas like job advertisements, hiring practices, and employment benefits. However, laws are often unable to prevent against non-explicit cases of ageism. Similarly, while the UN General Assembly adopted a resolution in December 2012 that called for strengthening of international protection of older adults, there remains no comprehensive international treaty compelling member states to protect these rights. Addressing ageism requires a multifaceted approach involving policy changes, education, shifts in societal attitudes, legal protections, and institutional practices to ensure that older adults can age with dignity and respect. To address this, The World Health Organization recommends improving education to dispel myths and stereotypes, as well as raising awareness of the impact of ageism, intergenerational interventions to create cooperation and empathy between age groups, law and policy changes which can reduce inequity and discrimination. And these efforts require commitment from governments and institutions as they hold the most power to create change. I also think this requires some creativity. And I just heard a wonderful story about a retirement community that was established on Arizona State University. And it was quite expensive to get into, so it limits people there. But once the people were in this community, they had access to everything that was offered at the university.
Wonderful.
All of the entertainment, the theater. And I thought, this is brilliant.
Yes.
I think it helped the university, and these folks who are in this community can have access to these young people every day, and it can be so intergenerational.
Which is always wonderful, isn't it? That's always going to lead to something great for both. They're going to get out of it. Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot, I think, which is positive. I know in the UK it varies between area, but certainly most local administrations heavily subsidize, if not totally cover the cost of bus travel, which, this idea of enabling people to be mobile, to go out, to use libraries, to go into shopping parades, to interact with people, I think is very important. And it seems to, it has to, I guess, encourage a lot of people who would otherwise just be sitting at home. So that there are some positive initiatives out there. And I guess a lot of politicians are aware that their voters are in the aging population. So they better make sure they look after them. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe there's some.
And also, you hear the saying, like 60 is the new 40.
Yeah.
70 is the new 50. The 60-year-old of today is not the same 60-year-old of 50 years ago. And may I say that I completed an Ironman competition at the age of 61.
Oh.
And I'm super proud of that.
Yeah.
You know, that I could model that for my children and my kids around me, that it's possible.
It is, isn't it? Wonderful. And you are and will be a tremendous role model to those that have seen that.
I hope so.
Seen it, know about it. So where might we focus our intentions? Rosemary Lane, focal point on aging in the UN's Division for Social Policy and Development, says that stereotyping lies at the heart of ageism, as we've said, as it does for sexism and racism. Much of it stems from a fear of aging, triggered by age milestones such as plans for retirement. We need a cultural shift that starts with stimulating debate on the pervasiveness of ageism, whether institutional or subtle, deliberate or unconscious, which has become an acceptable social norm. We therefore urge member states and the entire world to prioritize this issue and enact laws and regulations to strengthen the protection of the rights of older persons and to eliminate all forms of discrimination, abuse, and violence against them, including ageism in employment, healthcare, and other settings. So let us join her in setting as our focus intention for this week. We will that all member states of the United Nations are moved with compassion and pragmatism to prioritize the enactment of laws and regulations to strengthen the protection of the rights of older persons and to eliminate all forms of discrimination, abuse, and violence against them, including ageism in employment, healthcare, and other settings. Please join us in holding this.
May it be so.
And as always, we'll include that intention with our show notes.
That about wraps it up for this episode. Remember, you can connect with us in the Facebook group and for live intention holding in Clive's daily Insight Timer offerings, and with me in the Labyrinth Activist Network's Zoom calls. Details of how to hook up with these are in our show notes. Look out too for our next special topic episode, which we'll be releasing in the next few days. Thank you for listening and for sharing with us and holding intentions. We look forward to connecting again next time. And in the meantime,
thank you. Go well. Stay safe.
And remember, we're more powerful together.
Impact is presented by Ellen Binns and Clive Johnson and produced by Impact Productions. Our theme music is by Chris Collins and our logo artwork is by Auto Classic. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible or your favorite podcast provider. We're a non-commercial podcast dedicated to people of any faith tradition or none who yearn for healing in our troubled world. Please pass on the word so others may join us in making an impact. Thank you for listening.